Hello everybody, this is JD. I am going to talk to you and explain why I wrote in Facebook the things I have about the incident in Baltimore. It's time I say something. In the process, we're going to cover law and order, freedom and justice, due process, and the removal of the almighty, all-powerful, above-the-law police force within the United States. First, a little background of my experience with police forces in the United States. My second wife, when we were separating, wanted to keep me out of the house. So her and her friends concocted a plan. I went over, I sat down beneath her car with my legs beneath it, took her hand in my hand, which she pulled back and immediately put on the steering wheel, and I asked her to come inside and let's talk about this. She didn't want to. I didn't know that she had a boyfriend at that time, who after we separated dumped her because he didn't want anything serious. But I left and she called the police. Now a Chesapeake policeman showed up and she told them what happened. And the policeman said, "Lady, I can't do nothing with this." Basically, this is what my second wife told me. Now, if you say he grabbed you and dragged you from the car, I can do something. Now, do you want to say that? And she agreed to it and falsified a warrant, and I was arrested for a day. Eventually, when we went to court, the judge almost threw her in jail. I believe that police officer should have gone to jail for perjury. He caused her to perjure a warrant that got me arrested on something I didn't even do. That was a police officer that did that. Now, I had another time when a police officer, I was working in an area, and they had a street they converted into a walking mall area, and it was during the daytime, and I was doing some construction in one of the shops that were there, and they were tearing down a building or tearing up a building, but they had a lot of trucks and everything, just 2 doors down, and there was a police officer there. I asked the police officer if I could bring my car up there to offload the stuff, and then I'll go park it. Then I'll come back and pick it up. And the police officer says, "Sure, that's no problem as long as you don't leave the car all the time." No problem. So I got the car, did everything, drove the car back at the parking spot, did what I had to do, secured the door because people broke in from the back door. Then I went and got my car and loaded everything up. And then this other police officer, she comes up and she starts giving me a hard time. And I told her, I said, I talked to a police officer that was here earlier. He said it was okay. She didn't want to hear that. And so I threw my arms up and said, "Gosh, doggone, son of a bee. Son of a bumblebee, to be exact." So she tried to find if I was cussing at her. She could find no way that I was cussing at her. She called another officer. They went through the books. They called up. And after about 2 hours of sitting there, she gave me a ticket for having my car on the mall once, so I had permission. Well, there was a meter maid or a city worker that witnessed me asking the police officer. So went to court. The judge let me bring her. I brought her in. She told the judge that police officer so-and-so said I could bring my car on. And then the judge looked at me and said, "A meter maid cannot tell you you can bring your car. Now, if a police officer told you, that would be okay." I'm looking at her, she's looking at me, and we're wondering what the heck. So the judge hits me with an outrageous fine. Why? Because I had to be guilty. Now that's not due process either. I will admit I was on the mall, and I do admit it was a no driving area unless there was construction, and I was doing construction, etc., etc., etc. Then another time, I pulled in a parking lot and there was arrows pointing the direction of flow of traffic. And I started down with the arrow's direction, and this person in this big truck pulls out, had to jerry-rig it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it started down in the wrong direction. And he expected me to pull over to the side because he was a police officer. He wasn't on duty. He wasn't in a police vehicle. He was just a police officer. He ripped out his badge and said, "Look, I can go down this way. I am a police officer." Now, these are minor instances that I come across. I have great respect for police officers, but I ran into 3 very bad ones. How many have you all run into? They are not above the law. Now, our government should be broken down into 2 distinct parts when it comes to the law. I mentioned this: freedom and justice, and law and order. Freedom and justice is the responsibility of the federal government. They are to ensure, in accordance with the Constitution, that freedom and justice is upheld. In other words, due process. Now, due process has a long heritage within the United States. No other nation has it as such. Not even England. And what is interesting is it came from the Magna Carta. Section 39, paragraph 39, article 39, whatever you want to call it. And it all deals with the arrest and apprehension and the persecution of an individual by the law. Go to the Magna Carta, read article 39, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, the Constitution, from the preamble all the way to the first 10 amendments, covers due process. Actually, due process is covered in the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th Amendment. All that is to explain due process. Now, that is the responsibility of the Constitution to see to it that each and every individual has due process. Due process says you can't just go and apprehend somebody because you just don't like the way they're standing there, or the way they're dressed, or the way they look, or whether or not they have a darker tan than you. Plain and simple, you cannot do that by law. Law and order is the responsibilities of the state, local community, and the people. But law and order must always follow the proceedings of due process. Now, to get to the Baltimore 6, Police 6. Why are they complaining? Why are they upset? Are they afraid that the due process of the law is not fair, is not just, is not equal, that they will be hung because they're innocent? If they're guilty, then they should be arrested. A man died. But due process will show whether or not they were guilty of negligence, they deliberately injured him, they deliberately threw him in the van after the injury, ignoring the injury, or that they are totally innocent. That's due process. Are they afraid of the very things we all have to live by, and they believe they do not? Do they think that they are a special citizen that is above the law and order and do not have to adhere to due process? Do they feel that because they wear a badge and a gun that they can go around and do whatever they want, like that guy who was driving in the wrong way? I mean, it's minor driving in the wrong way, but he felt he had that right because he has a police badge and he could do it if he wanted to. Actually, that's what he told me. If I want to drive the wrong way, I could do it because I am a police officer. And he whipped out the badge. I said, no, you can't. Do you have your book? I'll write a ticket on you. Bottom line is, people, I praise the police department for the many good, outstanding individuals that sacrifice daily trying to do the job right. They work so hard at it. But remember, people, our police force comes from our society, just like the military. Our military comes from our society. Now, I've been in the military. I witnessed great sailors. And then I witnessed some of them that should never have been allowed to enter the military. When you can't even turn your back in your own birthing area without having everything stolen from you. Yes, that goes on in the military quite regular. Because people who come from society don't belong there. Now, military is not really well liked when it comes to due process. Nor is the police force, because both of them cover up the failures that are allowed to enter into those services. Instead of following what is best, police force might need 2,000 people. They find 100 of them that are bad. They got to take it because they need 2,000 people. No, they have to say no. Because those 100 that are bad is what reflects on all that 1,900 of outstanding, superior performing, wonderful men and women, and makes them all look bad. Our police force must realize their responsibility to each and every American to see to it that proper due process is done in accordance with the Constitution. Law and order must be maintained with due process. That is deeply entrenched into each and every one of us. How? Somehow the Magna Carta seems to be born inside an American citizen. And you all know how the Magna Carta affected this nation. It's called the American Revolution. And it was written 300 years before, 250, 300 years before the American Revolution. So people, yes, I praise the police force. And there are some outstanding individuals in every single police force in this nation that I would strongly support and stand behind. But unfortunately, there's also a few of those who need to be properly handled. And that is not covered up, not allowed to happen, not so. For the police force must understand, not only are they enforcing the law of the land, but they must ensure that proper due process is always maintained. We don't arrest an individual just for the sake of arresting him. Heck, you're beginning to sound like traffic courts. They got quotas to fill, so they got to go out and get traffic tickets so they can get a new something or something. They need money. Some deny it. Some say it's so. I don't know one way or the other. But I do know this. Due process is so important to our Constitution that it actually uses 5 amendments of the first 10 to explain it, to ensure that, which is a simple paragraph, almost like 2 sentences. In the Magna Carta, it's section 39, article 39, paragraph 39, or line 39. But it explains the arrest, seizure, and processing of an individual who has, quote unquote, not done anything. That the law cannot, the government cannot just apprehend people for the sake of apprehending people. So people, I say, if those 6 police officers are truly innocent, which they could very well be, and might very, very well be, but they must follow the due process for their innocence. They must trust the judicial system that the truth will come out and that they will be found innocent if they are, or guilty. I hope they are not. But due process must be allowed. No one, I repeat, no one at all inside the United States that is an American citizen is above the law for any reason whatsoever. And I'm a strong believer in the Constitution, and I'm a strong believer in that. So people, I hope this explains to you why, even though I strongly admire the police force, and I feel they go through much worse than any military man, because a soldier in battle gets to shoot first and ask questions later, and a policeman, no matter what the situation is, must refrain from shooting, refrain from physical violence, must first ask questions and then take the appropriate action without over-exerting police force upon the situation. Now, for the people in Baltimore who lost all kinds of property and stuff, I personally feel they have the right to sue City Hall and the mayor. She said, let them do their destruction. Upon that, she gave the people permission to tear into businesses, to tear them up, to destroy, to take, to loot, whatever they wanted to do. By those words, she bears full responsibility for all the action that the citizens of Baltimore or whoever else did. And therefore, the city of Baltimore and her is fully responsible for all losses of damage. Again, due process. Due process must be followed. If it's good enough for those policemen, it's got to be good enough for the mayor. See what I'm saying? That's due process. No one is above the law. Thank you. This is JD. This is how I feel about the situation. Have a good night. I'm posting this tomorrow. I'm recording it